All right, welcome everybody to Cycle Jerks Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Stewart, joined by my co-host, Chris Padavana. Chris, how you doing?
Good morning. How are you all doing?
Yeah. And today we're very excited to be joined with Laurent Freiden, who is of Dirty Sundays, and he's an avid mountain bike collector, and he's been putting on an event called Velo Cosmos. It's coming up here November 14th through the 17th, I think, 18th. But Laurent, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, hello. Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, Chris first made me aware of you and the Velo Cosmos event and got me digging into the Dirty Sundays and seeing all the bikes that you've built over the years and I just thought to myself, how do I not know this guy? But can we talk about where did you grow up originally?
I was born in Luxembourg
Oh,
and
okay.
well, I lived there till 2007, moved over the border to Germany, and then 2015 we came over to California. Uh, Met my wife in 2008, who's from California. She did her studies over there. After she was done, we decided the weather is better here, so moved over here.
Yeah, California weather. It's pretty hard to beat. So, when did you first fall in love with a bicycle? When did that start for you?
I didn't ride bikes at all as a kid till I was 10 because I
Wow.
just saw road bikes and kids bikes and I was like, ah, it's kind of lame.
Hmm.
I had a custom built go-kart that I pedaled around that I eventually beat other kids on bikes and rode steep hills up. So I think that's where I got my strength from.
Yeah.
But then yeah, and we didn't have the BMX scene like here in the States that didn't exist.
Mhm.
And then I saw the first mountain bikes, and I always wanted to be a rally driver. I was always going towards the off-road. And when I saw the first mountain bike, I was like, now I want to learn how to ride. And but I had like old road bike from my cousin and was trying to ride that on tarmac and couldn't quite handle it with drop bars. And I actually rode it the first time on a gravel path, like going off road, and it was like, oh yeah, now I got it. Now I get like the response from what's happening here.
Mhm.
And yeah, I got my first mountain bike in 1990, so I was like 11, and then yeah, it just grew from there on. I think 2 years later, well, I did my first race 2 years later, and then we went to visit the World Cups in Houffalize Belgium. And I think that day really changed it to like a real passion, like just getting out of the car there and see 20,000 people and all the cool stuff that I have never seen before because there was no internet.
Right.
And in Luxembourg, there were eventually a few cool bike shops, but not in that size. And that's where it started.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's quite a spectacle when you go to one of these events where you see all the team rigs and the mechanics and the racers and it's just super cool. I can imagine it's like 13. I've been in the industry a long time, so out here we have Sea Otter, and
Mhm.
I've been going to that since like year one, as a rep. But I can imagine as like a young boy seeing it, and how that would, elevate things for sure.
Right.
Yeah,
It's interesting to hear all those, those aspiring events that you attend when you're younger and just, it's just opening up your eyes to, to this amazing world of bikes.
yeah,
Yeah, you see things differently. You soak it even more in than nowadays.
Right.
And
yeah,
yeah, but I would still, I think everyone who's riding bikes should go visit at least one World Cup and really stay there for the whole week
yeah,
and really get to meet the riders. It's not like other sports where you don't get to meet the pros. Like they're everywhere. You're eating next to them in the restaurant. You're walking next to them. You can
Yeah.
chat with them. It's and that's what I love about mountain biking. And it's still kind of like a smaller sport. And we all want it to get bigger and whatever. But on the other side, it's really nice to keep it more like a little family. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I had an experience like that. Uh, I don't know, maybe 15 years or so ago. We went to Whistler for Crankworks, and we went to ride, and then at the end, Crankworks was happening, the Joyride event, and we're like going down this trail, and we kind of come to the spot. We stop on the side of the trail, and there's like six people there, and it was like all these guys, Kurt Voorhees and Mitch Rapalato and Brian Lopes, and it was like they were all just right there, stopped at the same time, and then we started talking, and then I don't know, I was just like I started realizing like, oh, hey, I'm talking to Brian Lumps right now about about this trail. It was just cool. And then, being in the village that whole week and just, you just to where you're just hanging out with everybody. It's just cool.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
they're not that much different than us. They're just a little bit faster, you know.
A little bit, just a
Yeah, a little
little
bit faster.
bit.
Yeah. But yeah, it's cool. The accessibility of the sport, for sure. So let's go back to your in childhood though. So were you do you have any siblings?
I have a sister who's 7 years younger than me.
7 years younger. Okay. And then how about your folks? Were they into bikes at all or not so much?
Um, yeah, I mean, not at the point where I was born and grew up. My dad always told me the stories that he did all these crazy things on bikes, and
Hmm.
he wanted to put like moped tires on his bicycle in the 60s and whatever.
Well,
Um, but yeah, at the point where I started riding, they didn't have bikes, and then they eventually got back into it, riding together as a family.
hmm.
But yeah,
Are they
no real background.
are they still back in Luxembourg?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So you get back there often?
Yeah, we had a little break during COVID where we
Yeah.
couldn't visit. But now we pretty much go back every summer. We have a little daughter who's 5, so that's our only chance um, to see them. And so yeah, we go back every summer there.
Nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
good family trip.
Yeah. So, okay. So, you're young boy racing bikes. You go to your UCI event, changes your worldview, and you dive into it at a different level, right? Your interests and you're seeing things a little differently. When did you start with the collection? What was the motivation for that, and what was the first bike?
Yeah, the collection came very late.
Hmm.
And I started like working in a bike shop in 94 already. So as a 15-year-old boy, I took the bus to drive to the city and work at this bike shop. Bought a S bike, which was pretty very well known in Europe, not so much in the US, but
Hmm.
very cool design. And I had these bikes that I had during my life. I always kept them. And it was pretty much when we decided to move to California, and I was going through my parents' house to clean everything out. And I was like, okay, I'm going to sell all this old stuff. And went on eBay, and eventually, you find your dream bike from back then, the Yetis and Ketchams and whatever, and ended up buying more. And that's a very typical way most yeah, that's how most guys start. And so yeah, I'm only doing this for 10 years. Yeah, it's like 10 years now. And
Only 10 years.
yeah, my first race bike was actually from Jean-Pierre Drucker, or Jean-Pierre Drucker. He was he was a cyclocross racer. I think he was once third at World Championships. He was also a downhill national champion. And he bought a Volvo Cannondale from the team during Worlds in '97. And I just posted on a local Luxembourgish Facebook group. I'm looking for old bikes. And he's like, oh, I have this team bike. Yeah, that's how the team bike started. And we came to the US, and on eBay randomly, there was a Giulio Furtado GT. And I couldn't believe that I got it for a decent price. And then I think a couple of years later, there was an old Volvo Cannondale mechanic who contacted me, who followed me, and that was pretty much the turning point where he was like, I have a basement full of stuff. That's why I have so many Volvo Cannondales.
Hmm.
Um, he was like, do you want all of it? Like, I was selling it to me for a fair price. I was like, this is all I have. And I was like, yeah, that's okay. I like what you're doing. I want to support that. I want to see those bikes getting restored and rebuilt and shown to people. And that was the point when I was like, I think I'm going to focus on the race bikes because the race bikes are so much more interesting. They're so specific. They need specific parts. Any other bike that I build, you can build it up pretty much with random parts. Eventually, you use period correct parts, but if you don't find a part, you just use another one. You build it up. I'm looking at it, and once it's done, it's like, yeah, it's kind of boring to me. Like there's nothing else to do.
Hmm.
The race bikes are never really done. There's always more stories that come up, and then there's always maybe little parts that are not 100% correct because all those prototype and team only parts they're really hard to find, and there's always a little percentage that you can make it better. And and then I decided to just sell all the random bikes, and yeah, also I needed the money to buy more of the bike. And
So,
once your name is out there, now I'm at a level where people just contact me or friends look out for me and are like, here, I found this and that. So yeah,
yeah. What was the mechanic from Cannondale that first got you that all that hooked up? What was his name?
it was Napper, Mike Napieralski or so.
Okay.
And the funny story about that is my dad took a photo of him and Doug Dalton in '99 in Cameroon at the World Cup finals
Okay.
with their glasses of champagne, and they were cheering and all happy and their funky sunglasses. And I posted that photo on Instagram, and then people tagged them, and that's how he found me.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Interesting. Well,
Yeah.
I was with Cannondale back in '97. And so that was right in the heyday of the Volvo Cannondale. We had Miles and Missy and Tinker, these legends of the sport. And we were doing a lot of really interesting things with bikes back then, trying different stuff. But yeah, so when I was going through your collection of bikes, I was like, oh yeah, you brought back all those memories from Volvo Cannondale. Yeah. But so are the race bikes that you're building, are they genuine team like the Julie Furtado bike? It's not a is that a what did Julie actually race that bike, or is it a
I,
replica of Julie's race bike?
no, they're all original bikes.
They
I don't
are.
like
Wow.
cars. I don't. I mean, I'm not a big fan of replicas. I know some people do it.
Hmm.
Some people do it really well. Most people just take the shortcut and they're like 2 months in and they're like, oh, this is taking too long. And they choose other parts. And which is okay if you want to do that for yourself. But then some of those bikes get posted, eventually online in magazines, and I like, oh, this is such and such bike with the wrong parts on it, or even if you have original bike and rebuild it with wrong parts, I'm like, well, that's not how it was, and I don't want to show that. Like the bikes, I have some bikes, yeah, that are not done, some bikes that I'm working on for 10 years now.
Hmm.
But it has to be correct, if yeah, I don't know, it like sometimes, if you have a prototype fork, eventually after the prototype, the next model that was sold to the public was that same fork, but just, you know, the the mass produced model.
Hmm.
So sometimes I then use that fork because finding a prototype stuff is like so difficult.
Right.
And if there's one or two parts missing, well, I rather have the bike built up and shown to people than, have it laying there without one part missing. And
Yep.
but yeah.
So in a case where maybe you have an actual race bike, and it's mostly complete, but let's just say you need brakes to complete the bike. There's a specific that brake type that was used on that bike at that time by the racer, or are you actually just seeking the actual brakes from their bike originally? I mean, how because you could keep going with the
Right.
obscurity of things and
Yeah, and that's what I meant with the race bikes are never done. It always
yeah.
keeps going further and further. I have a bike now from Dave Cullen and Schwinn Straight 8.
Oh,
And part of that season, he used the first Shimano, I think they were, uh, yeah, the first Shimano disc brakes, the with the four piston, I think, and they had like a little cooler mounted under the saddle, and they had double rotors, and
Wow.
it was a crazy thing. And there was only about I talked to Steve Bemke, who was at Shimano developing these brakes and stuff, and he's like, there are only like a dozen made, and only very few selected racers got them.
hmm.
He's like, I didn't even keep a pair for myself. And so I know there's a bike at Troy Lee Designs on display that has a set of those brakes, but they belong to that bike. But finding those brakes, it's pretty much impossible. Collie doesn't have any.
Yeah.
Um, so he's like, I was also using after that, they brought out like the first XT kind of downhill brake. And he said, I was also using those during that season. So that's what I'm going to go with. Eventually, one day, I'll find the prototypes, but yeah, it's very difficult.
Some patience there, just kind of holding out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the whole way to even get to the point where you know what you need, that's even a whole different story.
Right.
Contact mechanics and photographers to because you don't have photos, especially of the older bikes. Anything before 95 or so, the early 90s, there's almost no photos, and the video material is useless. Like
Right.
you cannot read like a little logo on the part and whatever. So yeah, just to figure out what you need is already taking so long.
But I imagine you've established a lot of relationships, with different people over the years, um, where maybe you have some better connections on how to find that stuff.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Over the years, I got a lot of connections, and yeah, I got pretty lucky. I mean, moving to the US opened so many doors. Like it's just in Luxembourg, there's not really that bike industry, or there's no bike industry.
Hmm.
And and then coming over here, and going to the Hall of Fame and to Interbike and everything. Um, yeah, I just got really quickly got all those connections, and then I mean online you just write people and eventually they answer you and help you, or they don't. So,
Mhm. Yeah, the Mountain Bike Hall of Fame in Fairfax is it's really interesting going there. I was surprised at the amount of really early bikes they had on display. I was expecting to see more, 90s era mountain bikes, 80s, you know. But yeah, it's quite a collection there. You have three of your bikes are on display there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've I have three bikes there, and so I think the reason why they have older bikes is just because, Joe Breeze and all those guys,
Yeah.
that's the period where they were more active, where they were building bikes. And then I'd say I mean, I still know the early 90s, but from the mid 90s on, like they were not involved as much with the industry.
Yeah.
And that's a process that is, a little bit changing now, I think. They are looking to kind of like move on and get younger people involved, and because they're all retired, uh
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah, it's fresh
We,
blood.
we had Charlie Kelly on the podcast a while back. And
Yeah.
so it was really, cool going over the history of the first race and, the clunking and, his history is, I mean, he's right there at the inception of mountain biking. And
Mhm.
yeah, so it was just cool having him on and getting his perspective on what it was like back then, but then also today, you know.
Right.
One story about the Hall of Fame and Joe Breeze. I went there after I got my Julie Furtado GT.
Hmm.
I went there and they have her bike from 97 on display. And when I got my bike, mine is from 95. It has a one wheel from 96 and one from 97. So they're mismatching.
Hmm.
And then I saw the one at the Hall of Fame and I look at the wheel set and it's exactly the same wheel set, just the other way around, of course.
Oh, wow.
So like their front wheel was a 96 wheel, so it didn't match the bike.
Hmm.
And I was convincing Joe, I'm like, I have your wheel, let's swap it. So I have a
Mhm.
matching wheel set,
Yep.
not period correct. And you'll have your bike all original again.
Yeah.
And it took me 1.5 years to really convince him to do it. His wheel had a UCI tag on the front hub, number.
Oh,
So he was like, "Oh yeah, but she raced it," and I'm like, "Well, no, in '97 she only did like two UCI races, and then uh, she had to retire because of her health issues." And the bike she raced at those two World Cups was another bike because the colors of the headset, etc., they're not matching. This bike that she raced might have been from Seattle or something. So like that wheel was never on that bike and never raced the World Cup. So yeah, it took us a while, but I think now he knows that I'm kind of a freak about those things, and I wouldn't just say it to get a UCI tag.
right.
Right.
I hope.
Well, what you're describing is something that I went through. I used to be really into Volkswagens, really early Volkswagens and restoring them and you get to be the hunt is really fun. Like I remember building that car. The last car that I did was, it's a really esoteric car and getting all the little details just right and just chasing down stuff. That's exciting. And when you finally do land the correct item, There's this satisfaction, like it's a hunt that maybe only you're on, but when you do finally get the item, it's so satisfying. And you know, mentioned eBay. eBay was helpful for me and my process of building this Volkswagen, but eBay is certainly a great resource. But when you get into the weeds at the level you're at, I'm sure like race mechanics and whatnot probably help even more so. Um, but yeah, getting getting that wheel swap, getting Joe Breeze to make that agreement. What I mean, do you feel like doing an in zone dance when you finally got the deal done?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it didn't matter as much for my bike.
Uh-huh.
I have kind of the wrong wheel set anyway, but they were hers, so I'm kind of, I guess I'm keeping them on the bike.
Yeah.
And you know, this whole thing about the race bikes, like they're not really my bikes. Like
Yes.
I don't care if you know I'm restoring my bike or if I'm helping someone else. Whatever bike I see, I want it to be correct. And it doesn't matter if I own it or who owns it. You know, it at this point it was just really I was talking to an ex-pro racer, Petra Bernhardt from Austria. She was a downhiller, and I was saying, oh, I wish I would find someone who, you know, who would give me money for the bikes or who could like have this collection and show it somewhere. And, you know, because it just, it was just getting too much, also too expensive. And, and she was like, well, you are the guy, you know, like, so I'm
Yeah.
kind of, I'm like, okay, I'm like, you know, this is kind of like my mission now. I have to do it because, you know, there's a few people that do a few bikes, race bikes, but there's not really many that, or maybe not any, I don't know, that really, you know, have 30 and
Hmm.
restore them one after each other and keep going. So yeah, so I just dedicated myself to that mission. It's just, you know, as more as I do and as more as I put it out there, they're getting more popular. So I'm kind of raising the values of my bikes, but then it's also getting more expensive to buy them
Yeah.
because people who are selling race bikes look at my page and everything. They're like, oh yeah, those things are cool and oh, that's worth money.
Hmm.
So I have been pretty lucky so far. I've never gotten a bike for free, really, but I've gotten them for fair prices and, you know, what pretty much prices that I could afford. But some of the race bikes, they are getting sold for a lot more.
Yeah.
And it's just, yeah, you know, there's collectors that have unlimited resources, you know, people that collect cars that cost 100 or 100,000 or a million, you
Yeah.
know, if they're into bikes, I mean, what's 10 grand?
Right.
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 So, but that's, yeah. And that was one reason to also start an event like Velo Cosmos. Eventually, you know, to find support, to get my word out there, to get the collection out there, to share it with people and you know, eventually get stuff donated or make a little bit money with it. But you know, how are you going to do that? Um, it's not a real business.
Right.
So is that what inspired you? You know, you have all these bikes now. You've been collecting all these bikes, and yeah, you know, you're the guy. So then you decided to start Velo Cosmos here in Grass Valley.
Yeah, I always thought I wanted to have like a physical museum, which, you know, is pretty much impossible because I would have to either pay rent or buy a building unless I would find someone who, who wants to run a bike shop or coffee place or whatever, and is like, oh yeah, I would love to have your collection on display here,
Right.
which I had at the Wheelhouse
Oh, right.
for a couple of years, but yeah, then they sold it, so now I took my bikes out again. Uh,
Do
but
you
yeah,
do you
I would
have them at your house, or do you have a storage? That's quite a collection to try to keep in really good condition. Like just storing them could be really challenging, especially if it's in your garage or something with life going on all around them. Um, how do you store
they are in a secret bunker.
them?
Can't tell you on this podcast. You
Of
kidding?
course they are. Yeah,
Uh,
nice.
yeah, it is definitely an issue with all the rubber parts and everything, it's aging.
Yeah.
So I know people that pack them, they have them vacuum packed.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So, but yeah, and then you have the heat, the cold, even inside your house, the summers are pretty hot or
Sure.
so yeah, that is a bit of a problem. And yeah, we definitely are limited on space here. I have a little museum where I have my jerseys and pictures and a few bikes
Hmm.
up here. That's the reason why we only have one child and not having a second one was taken.
We'd love to have another child, but the space
Yeah,
is
I
filled
know.
with my vintage racing
Yeah.
bikes. Yeah. Well, so with these, and we've been talking a lot about Julie Furtado, right? Because you had the GT, that was like the first one to. Have you ever met Julie? I mean, or some of these other racers where you've actually built, or restored their race bike? Have you ever had an encounter with them?
Yeah, well, I've met many, but I actually have never met Julie.
Oh,
Um, Even back in the day, I mean, Julie is a very private person from what
yes.
I've heard. And I know a few people that worked with her, like like Dave Mag or Doug Hatfield, who was her mechanic at GT.
Hmm.
It's hard to get a hold of her. I'd love to meet her, but even going to the races, to the World Cups, I think on several occasions we ate at the same restaurant next to the Team GT.
Uh-huh.
Julia was never there.
Oh,
After the races or so, when they were signing autograph sessions, I have never seen Julie. I think she might not have liked, the public too much, and I think
hmm,
she's still trying to avoid that. Like we've never seen her at the Hall of Fame, at the museum.
hmm.
But otherwise, yeah, I mean, there's like when Dave Cullinan got inducted into the Hall of Fame, that's when I brought his DBR dual response down to the museum, and he was super happy. And Dave he's a very open and person who likes to talk and likes to interact, and then is probably the opposite um,
Yeah,
of Julie or others. And so yeah, there's all these different characters, but yeah, if you go to the World Cups, I mean, it goes like, especially after the race, you go out drinking and partying, and and yeah, there's all kinds of great stories there. I should
yeah.
maybe tell this story. This is a good one.
All right.
Um, I got to meet Cedric Gracia in Lausanne, Switzerland in 2000, I think. I met him before, but never really had a conversation with him. In 2000, he won by almost 10 seconds in the rain. It was crazy. And we walked back to our apartment, and there was a doping control. and he was inside and he was with a beer already and he was like, oh, cheers, you know?
Mhm.
And I think we were like, you know, like 20 or so. And I think it was like our age. He was like a year older, maybe. And we looked around and we're like, oh, he's cheering with us. And we're like, we don't have beer. So we went quickly, got beer, and
Huh.
went inside the doping control. And he was there with another team member. And we were popping open the bottles and you know, got beer over the floor and everything. And we're drinking in there. And the lady is just like, what are you guys doing here? And we're like, well, we're gonna check him, like we're gonna test him now, you know. She's just like, no, no, you can't be in here, and he's like, yeah, it's fine, they are with me, like, don't worry, like, do your thing. And yeah, that was just, I don't know if you can still do that nowadays,
Right. You guys
but
are all hanging out at the doping center drinking beers.
A
yeah.
little more relaxed back then, right?
And yeah, he gave me his jersey and signed it, and since then we partied at every World Cup we went. No
Yeah.
matter if it was the night before the race, the night after, during the week, every night.
Awesome.
And yeah, those are the things that you really have to experience going to the World Cups. Not only
Right.
watch the race, but really the partying. I mean, back then it was obviously really crazy.
Yeah.
Before 2000, you had like Sean Palmer and
All
but
right.
yeah, but all those guys, I mean, I mean, there's so many stories that you know probably.
That's the thing. That's the thing that really kind of blows you away is like you see somebody going so hard the night before and just literally wrecking themselves. And then the next day they're on the podium. It's like, what? I don't understand. I never understood that. I remember Palmer at some event. I mean, it was like 2:30 in the morning and he's like all hammered. And then, he won the next day. And it's like, it's just hard to fathom, because, I mean, even if you are an elite athlete, I mean, I don't think you're immune to hangovers, you know, and and to be able to just somehow suck it up and still be better than everyone else,
But I
you
think
know?
like just like any athlete who's at the top of their game in a sport, like at that professional level, or just even at a high amateur level,
Yeah,
just the natural talent that a lot of those guys hold. I mean, I remember road racing and thought I was a good climber, and then you're riding with like the best climbers.
yeah,
This is Cat 1-2 Pro Race, and they're just like on another planet. It's
right.
like unbelievable. So guys like that, I'm sure even when they're partying a little bit hungover, just that the gift that they have and the talent and the years of training, just kicks in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you need the gift, which is not only the skills, but also the strength and the health, you know, to be strong and healthy and just
right.
Right.
be
I
able
always
to,
thought maybe they had some kind of special hangover trick. They
you know,
get
the
up at
crazy
3:30 and take six Advil and a shot of whiskey or something, and then the next morning they're fine. I don't know. Yeah, it's like, man, I don't know how they do it. It's pretty amazing. But
the
at
crazy
Whistler, it was the same kind of thing. For the Crankworks, guys are out till 3:30 in the morning the night before, and the next day they're double back flipping a 40-foot gap. It's like, okay, it's
It also just makes
incredible.
them that just makes them real though too, right? They're
Uh-huh.
just like the rest of us. They like to go out and have a good time.
Uh-huh.
They're just
It does kind of elevate their rock star kind of status too, though. It's like, well, Furtado, like she doesn't have any reputation for anything like that, right? Because she was more introverted. She kind of kept to herself. She was maybe more regimented with her diet and sleep and all that, to perform her best. But then there's the Cedric Gracia, who's, you know,
yeah, and that's like, you know, like Nico Vuyo, he was super serious about it. He didn't go out drinking.
right.
And you know, it's like Steve Pete and so said, like if we had been even a little bit serious, like man, we could have been at a whole different level.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
and the crazy thing is, at least in like the early cross country days, I think probably before it got Olympic and all, the European cyclocrosses and whatever joined. There were even the stories from Mike Kluge where he got, you know, drunk the night before and I think he almost missed his start or what happened again and I think he went on and won the race.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I think nowadays everything is a little bit more professional.
Yeah.
And even in downhill racing, I don't know if you can still do that. I don't know if you're on a team, I don't think they will let you do that anymore.
Right.
We have an enduro race here in Grass Valley called the TDS,
Oh yeah.
and that's pretty much like underground grassroots racing where there's like no rules,
Right.
and you kind of get to experience that.
It's like a
Right.
party that has a bike race.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that TD my son goes up and does the TDS every year. He
uh,
loves it. Yeah. He likes to party.
yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it is interesting to see. I mean, even like we had Michael Houghton on the podcast a while back, and he does his own podcast, but that they do like he was talking about how the downhill crowd's really getting into aerodynamics because that's a big focus of his podcast. And so like to think that they're doing like they've got these little disc brake covers. They've you notice the suits now are really tight, whereas back in the day the downhillers were wearing like real baggy outfits and whatnot. And that's all on this emphasis of trying to be as aero as possible. So because it's just seconds between first and third in many instances, and if you're a little bit more aero, maybe that makes a difference. And so to think that that side of the sport is going to that level, you got to believe that the other side of, where, your personal responsibilities or what have you are probably also at that same level of scrutiny where they're just trying to find every second they can. And, you know, you don't find too many seconds in boozing it up the night before your big, UCI World Cup. Because it is expensive to sponsor a UCI team, to have the whole squad there, the mechanics, the race rigs, the whole shebang. I mean, the companies are heavily invested in making a good showing. So
But
it makes sense.
the first World Cup races, they were very aero. Like they always
Oh
guys
yeah,
always wearing skin suits and sometimes at the beginning even wrote helmets.
right.
Right.
Um, and I mean, if you look at races like Mammoth, it was just a speed track, just going straight down the mountain.
Right.
They were, eventually using like the tension disc, the Tioga wheels, or the high profile rims. Like
Hmm.
I have some on my homepage from Het that the team Yeti used, and then they had these fork fairings. So behind the fork legs, they had this added this little plastic thing to make it more aerodynamic. And and then I think it was Steve Pete and so around when was it? The late 90s and Sean Palmer and like that group were like, no, this doesn't look cool. We need to wear baggy clothes.
Right.
And so the UCI, you know, banned the skin suit. But then, yeah, as the whole downhill got more and more professional, like over the last years, as you said, we saw them like tucking in their jerseys and they're wearing pants. They're so tight. I mean, they're just like leggings.
Yeah.
And so now we're kind of in this in between where it's like almost it is pretty much like a skin suit.
Yeah. I
And
remember when you're talking about Mammoth and Tomac and that black leather. It looked like black leather, it was a skin
Right.
suit. And, and I do remember there was like, as I was a young mountain biker at the time, and then he had put drop bars on his downhill, or I think it was his downhill bike. He had drop bars on it.
on all
Yeah.
Yeah.
because he started racing mountain bike, I think in 86. He used some, I think he used some kind of cruiser BMX bikes with 24-inch wheels or something like that.
Yeah,
And
that sounds right.
on Mongoose in 87 when he had like a real mountain bike. And he was riding straight bars. And then I think in 89, he was at 7-Eleven. He was a road pro. And he was like using the drop bars because he wanted to have the same position on the bike, the same feeling. Eventually, he raced it at the first World Championships and yeah, did the downhill on drop bars. Um, I don't think it really helped him. I think he admitted later on that it was maybe a disadvantage. And I
Yeah.
think in 91, I think it was 91 when he was on rally and he still had drop bars for the first part of the season. And then he changed. Um,
Yeah,
but
I was working retail back then, I was just a kid. And I remember the Mongoose rep was always trying to get us to carry the bikes. And then they came out with the Tomac Signature Edition. And they had like a line of, I think there was 4 or 5 of them. That sealed the deal. We brought in Mongoose, started selling these IBOC International Bike of Champions, and they were like the Tomacs. And yeah, that was a fun era of mountain biking, you know.
and the crazy thing about Tomek was, he was so stylish. No matter what he was wearing, no matter what he did, people loved it and he looked good in it.
Yep.
Anyone else wearing a skin suit is like, oh, I don't know. Tomek wearing a skin suit is like, wow, it's
Right.
like this cat on the bike. And, I remember like going back to the World Cups in Houffalize in Belgium and years later when he had some trouble with injuries and he kind of got out of the cross country and he was in 30 whatever position, like the masses were just following Tomac. He was
Hmm.
jumping at every opportunity. Like they didn't even care who was leading the race. I mean, there were still spectators there, but the big mass was just following Tomac.
Yeah.
And
Well, like you
yeah,
say, he could do something kind of questionable for anybody else, but if Tomac did it, it was cool, you
Yeah.
yeah,
know? Yeah, he made it cool. Palmer had that a little bit too in that era, kind of in a different way, but I know Palmer kind of had that same kind of status,
yeah.
um,
Palmer changed the sport a lot, like
for
especially the
sure.
downhill. And it changed again after he dropped out. It really hurt the downhill and the whole mountain bike sport because
Mm,
he was just such a kind of freak and he had this glamour and he was a superstar and yeah, he brought that whole different vibe and
right,
wearing different clothes and just being like ridiculous.
right.
But, yeah,
Yeah,
it's if people nowadays say like Nino Schurter won everything multiple times, so they
yep,
say he's the GOAT. But I think anyone who lived through the 90s and has seen Tomac, is like will tell you that Tomac is the GOAT because no matter how much you win, I don't think you can reach the status that Tomac had.
yeah. Yeah, he was every month. I mean, every on the magazine, the cover or there's an article or whatever. All the ads were Tomac. I mean, yeah, he was running the show back in the day.
And he was just
Yeah,
riding that wave of like when mountain biking was just really kind of exploding and everything was technology was changing, and he was just kind of that figure,
Right.
at
It's
the
like
time.
the right person at the right place at the right time.
Exactly. Think of all the products, tires, and he had his own bike
Yeah.
line eventually, and yeah.
Yeah.
And he did it just with his riding style, eventually also winning races,
Yeah.
but led over and won a lot of races as well, and was obviously very famous and kind of same level if I don't know who was better.
Hmm.
Maybe Ned was better a little bit early on, and then Tomac for a period. But the thing that is really interesting, Tomac is seemed I don't really know him, but he seemed to be like a also more quiet person. Like, you know, off his bike, he didn't do like he was not like a big showman or anything. He didn't really, do anything to draw attention besides of just being super cool on the bike and jumping and being so stylish.
His hair too. He if ever he did the mohawk, we had we had these kids in town that they were just little Tomacs, and anytime Tomac would do anything, or they always wanted to have his bike, his tires, whatever he had, they would just come in the shop and they wanted it, hey, can you get this new tire? And I was like, oh yeah, sure, and they were really good customers. But when Tomac shaved the sides of his head, both these kids, like, I mean, like within a week, both these kids had the same hairdo.
So talking about Tomac, we didn't
Yes.
we didn't talk about this bike here.
Yeah.
Just look
Yeah.
that up because I don't know what your relationship to Giant is.
I'm an outside sales rep, so I've worked with them for 20, this is my 22nd year now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a 95 race bike, uh,
Yeah.
Tomac's original bike that was stored in a container that belonged at Magura, USA.
Wow.
So the bike was pretty much
Wow.
all original. And the thing is, it's not a Giant
Uh-huh.
because back then they raised the carbon frame. And Tomac didn't like the geometry. He always had like his specific ideas and his specific geometry.
Yep.
And so that bike was built at Yeti. I still have to reach out to them to get the whole background story of it. But they were all custom built for him. So
Wow.
it was just giant label.
Yep.
But you can see how you have the cables running on the side of the top tube, like the Yetis did. If
Yep.
you look at like the production models, they have the cables on the top of the top
Right.
tube.
So
That's a
the that was really common practice. I grew up racing BMX, and there was a time where Murray was sponsoring the top racers, Huffy was sponsoring, Stu Thompson, one of the biggest racers in the sport, was racing for Huffy, but he was just riding a red line with a Huffy sticker on it. So that's something that's been going on in racing for a long time. I do have some history with this cable routing setup. I wrote an AMP Mongoose. They partnered with AMP Research, and they had these full suspension early bikes, and it had the cable guides on it, like the Yeti made famous, the banjo, cables. Are those riveted on, or are they welded on?
Those are riveted.
Riveted.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the reason I ask is because I was going down, I was riding down this crazy track in Livermore, and I grabbed a handful of brake, and the front one popped both the rivets off, and I lost complete control of the brakes. Uh, yeah, and fortunately I didn't get injured, but it was pretty wild scenario. And I couldn't even believe it because I was so excited about this bike, and I knew the history of but later I had seen, I don't know if Yeti riveted them on in the early years, but I noticed later they were actually welded on. But yeah, those are actually riveted though.
Yeah, I think the early ones were welded, yeah. And
Okay.
they were, yeah, like the single pieces were welded each by each.
Hmm.
And but yeah, probably with the alloy frames they used rivets.
Okay. Yeah,
Uh,
I could see where the Maguras in this case that would prevent that. You know, obviously you don't have any pressure on that front one other than when you're shifting. But yeah, back then I was just running like I think it was just a linear pull, you know, V brake, whatever.
Like a cable, it was like a cable stop, like a
It was a
housing stop.
housing stop.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So, but yeah, interesting. Yeah, you know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thankfully I'm still alive today.
So let's talk about Velo Cosmos. That's coming up here, November 14th through the 17th. So tell us a little bit more. I'm looking at the picture, and it's not just mountain bikes. You got a lot of historic road bikes as well, it looks like.
yeah, I got the whole thing started pretty much. I was at a housewarming party, and I met um, the lady who is the hotel manager at the Holbrook Hotel in Grass Valley, which is a super old, nicely restored hotel, like kind of boutique looking. Like it's a really
It's
nice stuff.
It's
Yeah,
very
it looks
classy,
beautiful. Looks
really
beautiful.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was talking, I was talking to her, and I was like, I'm looking for a location to like display my bikes. I know I couldn't display them like full time in the hotel. That would be impossible.
Mhm.
But maybe we can do like a weekend thing or so. And she was like, "Oh yeah, sounds great." And because Nevada City, Grass Valley, it's becoming such a bicycle hotspot, and all the businesses, the hotels, they kind of want to get on board,
Yeah.
uh, and she was like, "Yeah, we would love to have more cyclists here, and so this would be great." And then I went home and I was like, well, if I do a collection, a display show with my race bikes, that is so specific. Like, how am I gonna get people to come up here, because
Hmm.
we have our little community here, but then um, there's not like hundreds of people that are interested in the history of mountain bike racing. So, and that's how it started. And I was like, I'm just gonna do an event for everyone, with like, I'd love to see all kinds of bikes. I want people to bring their bikes up. And I have seen previously in Switzerland, they did this Velo Concours shows. And I saw it online in magazines, the photos of it. And I always love the way how you put up the bicycle as a piece of art. And wherever
Hmm.
it is like a modern bike that is hand built or custom built, whatever, or if it's an old vintage bike, or it can be a bike that you rode around the world. Like it needs to have like a bit of a special story. And yeah, that's pretty much how I got that idea. And talking about bicycles as art objects, when we go back to the 90s, going to those World Cups, I bought jewelry made from bike parts, because back then we all put like these shiny parts, the anodized parts on our bikes,
Hmm.
and it kind of disappeared a little bit. We're still putting parts on our bikes, at least some people. But like that part of wearing the jewelry and buying bike photos or bike drawings or whatever. I even have lights hanging here that are made out of chain rings.
Hmm.
Uh, I really love that stuff, and it's still out there. And I kind of want to bring that vibe back, that lifestyle of, what how we experienced mountain biking in the 90s. It's more than riding a bike, it's more than just, I don't know, like there's like if you're a mountain biker, you're like your whole life is mountain biking kind of,
Yeah.
or cycling, it like I'm more mountain biking, but wherever if you're traveling on a road bike, on a gravel bike, whatever it is, there's always this lifestyle around it. All your friends are cyclists. All the events you go are cycling events, and you go to a vacation, you look at, oh, is there trails? Is there roads that I can ride? Wait, can I rent a bike? Like, and so that's kind of one part of the idea, and to yeah, to get more people interested in the event, to have everyone included, whatever you like to do on two wheels, you know, or get people interested that want to start riding, and get the community involved, and also advertise cycling to our community, and
Mhm.
advertise our towns to the visitors that we have. So we're gonna take you on two group rides. Um, we're gonna I'm gonna show you our towns. We're gonna take you past some of the mining museums. I mean, Nevada City, Grass Valley, they're beautiful old Victorian towns, like, and especially in the fall time, it's so pretty up here.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why you moved up here, Chris, right?
Exactly. Exactly. It's a beautiful area. And there's a
He was
lot of
trying to
history.
get away from me.
I know, right? There's so much cycling history here too. I mean, like you said, it's a hot
Yeah.
spot for mountain biking right now. Specifically, there's so much to offer. But you know, the Tour Nevada City race, the Course Classic, had a stage that started here in Nevada City. So there's a lot of cycling history in this area for sure.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, we'll have what's going to be new this year. We'll have speakers, so we're going to talk about certain things, like we have presentations. And there was one local guy, I think at 16, he started the Tour of Nevada City, the bicycle shop, with his friend.
Wow.
And his name was Jim Rogers. Unfortunately, he passed away in the early mid 80s, um, when he was like 27 or so. But in that short period of time, he started the bike shop. He started building bikes, road bikes, and the mountain bikes were called boogie bikes. And then he raced the Nevada City Classic, and I think he almost won it one year. He was leading and crashed like in the last corner or something like that.
Well,
We have some locals that know his story really well, so we're gonna talk about that, and we'll have Joe Breeze come up, and then
right.
he'll talk about the earlier days of mountain biking, and we'll have Paul Skillback. He's gonna talk about the pretty much the start of the Grundisch Challenge, like how the mountain bike racing became like a worldwide series with the Grundisch Challenge. It started, and then the UCI got involved and took over,
Mhm.
and then to the Olympics, and which all happened in less than 10 years, or in, yeah, pretty much, yeah, from 87 to 96, which is crazy, which I don't think that ever happened with any other sport. And so that that will be very exciting. And he has a lot of stories as well. He was a journalist, and he's also running the uh, what is it called? The hand built guide page, and he's like supporting like all the the hand-built manufacturers and talking about their bikes and all that. So
Yeah. Well, I know that the handmade bicycle show, and now I think they just call it Made now. But yeah, I know that that's been going on. We had a couple of them here in NorCal, and they've been moving it around. But that's a huge event, and everybody, it's just cool. Like when you think of bicycle as art, that's who you think of, right? Are these independent fabricators that are building really unique, you know, um, custom bikes. We had Steve Potts on the podcast a while back, and
mhm.
he's certainly one of those. He's very inventive and builds beautiful bikes. And yeah, there's a lot of really awesome builders. And I go to Chico for work, and I stop. One of my buddies works over at Paul, and I know Paul Components are really involved in a lot of the made. They work with a lot of the makers to build up customs and whatnot. And I know being in our shop, the shop I ran for a lot of years in the early '90s, we were really focused on mountain bikes, and we stocked all you name it. I mean, White Industries, Kuka, uh, Paul Components. Um, I'm forgetting probably most of them, but there were so many of these offshoot brands that there was like a situation with the aerospace industry. I think that funding for that had kind of dried up. So a lot of these guys were just making bike parts because you know, they knew how to machine stuff. And we would always try to have this. We had this display case with all the most cutting edge, newest equipment on it. And I know we built up a bunch of the Paul bikes with they had that Rasta colorway, whereas red, yellow, green, and they had the twist shifter and the brakes and everything. I mean, it's just cool. All the innovative things that were happening back then. Seems like there's a lot less of that with components now. It seems like with I mean, SRAM and Shimano just dominate everything, and you know, um, you don't really see too many of the fringe component manufacturers. There are some out there though, but yeah, it's just interesting in where the sport has gone.
Yeah,
Have
it,
you?
it's
I was going to
it,
ask, have you been to one of those handmade shows?
I've been in Sacramento a couple of years ago. I think it
Okay,
was it 2017 or I think we just moved up here.
yeah,
We lived in the East Bay and then moved up here. I think it was 2017. Yeah, it was pretty good.
yeah. Chris, have
Um,
you been to one of those?
No, no, I have not been to one of those. So
Yeah,
hope,
yeah. I
hope to,
definitely would like to go at some point.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. All right. And I see like Velo Cosmos, you have a Santa Cruz and a Grass Valley. Are you putting on two events? I just see the dates for Grass Valley, but is there a Santa Cruz one in the future?
yeah, so I had last year Doug Hatfield, who works for Santa Cruz and was with the syndicate team for 2 decades now or so. Um, he came up and he brought like 10 bikes up and he has a whole collection of old cruisers and all kinds of bikes. He has been around for a long time and has been a racer. And him and his buddies from Team Old Soil, they kind of wanted to put a show on in Santa Cruz. They came up and they were like, "This is so cool, we want to do the same thing."
Mhm.
Um, and we were trying to find a building. And first, the first idea was like, "Oh, we're gonna do like a month-long show." I'm like, "Whoa, that's a lot."
Yeah.
But we couldn't find a building that was big enough. It was just like, if we want to have whatever, 100 bikes or so, like where are we going to put them? It's
Hmm.
difficult to find something. And yeah, eventually he talked to Santa Cruz and they were like, yeah, you can use our showroom. And so Doug was pretty much putting that on. by himself, and we did not include vendors or it was just showing bikes and that's it. There was no ride or it was yeah. So it is. I don't know if it is a Velo Cosmos, kind of like it, but it definitely the idea comes from Velo Cosmos, and I don't know what we will do next year if he wants to do it again at Santa Cruz. I mean, their showroom is great. It's really it's big enough. We had 80 bikes in there,
Okay.
and we had lots of people there because it's a bit closer to like Santa Cruz is just bigger. The Bay Area is right there.
Mhm.
Right.
Um, and yeah, I mean, I was thinking it would be great, to have a Velocosmos in LA or in wherever, in other places.
Sure.
Um, I don't know. We'll see. I'm open for suggestions.
Right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I think you have something that it's like if it was to be a traveling thing, logistically, that could be pretty challenging, but you could see where bigger markets, obviously in LA, for example, I mean, there's so many people that ride bikes in the greater LA area. So, it would be a huge draw, you would think. It's just a matter of trying to logistically handle all of that. Speaking of that, so what do you do for work?
I started I mean, I used to work as a mechanic in Luxembourg, and it was pretty much like, a head mechanic of a printing machine,
Oh,
huge printing machine. And when we moved over here, I actually started working at Castro Valley Cyclery,
oh,
um, neighbors with Chris, and then I started a little side business, going to markets, importing products and selling them there. And then COVID hit. We moved up here, so I stopped working at the bike shop, and then COVID hit, and we had our daughter, so and I was staying home with her, and so now she's going to school. She started kindergarten this year.
okay.
So now I'm trying to figure out, like doing those events is one thing. Doing bike restorations for other people sometimes. Um, I'm doing markets again. Um, I have I have done a few things. I'm like my goal is pretty much like our whole goal to move to California. From having so much vacation and all the healthcare everything in Luxembourg.
Mhm.
Moving over here, our goal was like we want to have a lot of free time, or like we want to have at least the same standard of living. I would not have moved here if I have uh, 10 days off a year, because it wouldn't make any sense, even if the weather is nice. If you're inside a building,
Yeah,
it doesn't help you.
right.
um, so my wife went into teaching. um, so she has the summer off so that we can go back visit my family, and that's why I stay flexible, and I do a little bit several jobs here and there. um, but yeah, just now now I have a bit more time, so now I'm trying to figure out what else can I do, and like from working in a dark factory where it's really I did some nasty work, and I had some, at the end, I had a bad accident. And then we came over here and I went to these markets and I was selling at the San Francisco Zoo and I was selling near the beach. And I'm like, and I'm, probably making more money than I made in a factory. I'm just like, life can be so different.
Yeah.
just have to make that step and eventually take that risk. Although, you know, my wife being a teacher is like I can do that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's very nerve-wracking if you don't know if you're making money this month or not.
Yeah.
And other months are great. So that's a little bit of the downside of being that flexible.
Right.
Yeah,
But
right.
no,
Can you
it's
can you talk? You said something about Luxembourg and about coming to California and then giving up a standard, right? You have this healthcare and you have vacation. What is the is it? Can you describe what is the vacation for if you're a full-time employee in Luxembourg? What like here it's like 2 weeks, you get 2 weeks here in America generally.
it is about 6 weeks, a little maybe 1 or 2 days more,
Hmm.
30, 30 or around 30 days. It depends on the employer. And
Wow.
but then you get also you get a lot of holidays. I don't know if you get probably a little bit more than here.
Okay.
And like one example is um, I took 2 weeks off to go mountain biking. The first Monday, I broke my wrist in Slovenia. I still stayed there for the whole 2 weeks. They kind of fixed it, but not very well. Um, yeah, they had to re-break it and put a plate in
Oh boy.
it. But coming back, my employer was like, "Well, you were in sick leave from Monday on, so you're getting those 2 weeks back."
Oh wow. Wow.
Um, but then I was on sick leave for the rest of the year, which, getting those 2 weeks back, I still had like a month. And that's kind of how I met my wife because I had all this time, this free time. I went back to work in January and they were like, you have to take those 4 weeks by the end of March. I'm like, I don't really like the snow. I don't do skiing stuff.
Hmm.
Everyone else is at work. The weather here is miserable. And I just had met her like kind of randomly before, and I was like, I'm gonna come over and visit. And I flew to California, and that's kind of how it started.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's pretty cool. I mean, you always wonder, like you just picked up and left. But I always wonder, like, it's a couple years ago now. We went to Italy and France and Switzerland and did this cycling trip. And I had such a great time. And it makes you think, like, man, I'm so wrapped up in being in California, but maybe I could live in Italy and maybe that would be something to try. And yeah, but you just don't know. There's a lot of things about it. You never obviously want to do your due diligence before you make a big move like that. But yeah, but it's interesting. 30 days off. Geez, that would be nice. What do you think,
Right?
Chris?
Oh,
Chris worked
well,
7 days a week for during COVID for what
for years.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, no doubt. But it is interesting knowing how these different countries treat their employees and whatnot. Obviously there's places where you get treated much worse, all around the world also where you
Yeah,
hear
but,
stories
but
about that.
I think you can't really take Luxembourg as a standard. It's such a small country. It's the size of Nevada County here. So
Hmm.
that's like less than 700,000 people. And it got rich through the mining some 100 years ago. Or and yeah, and it's like a little bubble. Um,
Hmm.
Yeah, but
It's
that's
interesting. You
why.
go from one mining community to another.
yeah, I love mining towns.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. All right, well, all right, well, we should probably wrap it up here. Can you, how does somebody get involved with Velo Cosmos? Do you just show up, or are there tickets, or how does it work?
Yeah, you can. I mean, it's pretty much free to attend. This year I have raffle tickets. There's a link on my homepage, dirty-sundays.com. And so you can buy raffle tickets for $5. You can win a stay at the Holbrook Hotel. We'll see if, might have some other stuff that sponsors and vendors will give. And if we will have a exhibition, a Velo Concours, like a Concours d'Elegance, kind of like with the classic cars. So you can enter that if you have something that you think is special or that has a special story to it. Like crazy story last year was, I mean, a Cinelli bike is already pretty special. Early 70s, I think, road bike. And some Charlie from the Extreme Outfitters, which is a local bike shop here.
Oh, I know Charlie.
Um, yeah, and he had that bike on display, and he told me the story. It's like, yeah, the seller told me it was Tom Ritchie's bike, and we had Tom Ritchie here as a guest last year, and I'm very thankful for that, for Tom to supporting me. And there's another story to that because I lent him that that Ritchie Plexus that is at the Hall of Fame at the museum. I lent him that for his 50-year anniversary.
Oh, cool.
So he returned that favor and came up to support my event. And then that was supposedly at some point his bike. So at the end of the show, Charlie already left. And Tom was like, whose bike is that? I'm like, well, so and so. And so Tom said, this was my very first like race bike, my very first quality bike. And I hand painted it. I'm like, no way. Why didn't we know this earlier?
Yeah.
And
Wow.
so there's a story to every bike, and especially, the race bikes. There's so many crazy stories about that. And so yeah, if you have anything interesting, you can go to my homepage and you can enter. It's $20 per bike. And then we'll have probably 10 categories, whatever, the early road bikes, later road bikes, race bikes, downhill bikes, cruiser bikes, whatever. And you can eventually win your category, and then you get some. Last year we had some custom made mugs with Velo Cosmos and some other gifts from sponsors. And then we're also looking for vendors, like anything that has to do with bicycle art, especially, is what I really love to see.
Mhm.
Bicycle jewelry, paintings, drawings, whatever it is. Hand-built bikes. So we have a few of those here. So if you have a company and you're building bikes and you want to join us, you know, it's not a huge commercial event. It's a very like familiar, how do you say that? Familiar atmosphere.
Hmm.
So it's very special, and I want to keep it that way. So it will probably, at least not at this location, it will never grow to be huge and to be like, yeah, we need like, I don't know how many thousands of dollars of budget and whatever. It's very low key, but we had people come up from San Diego and wherever, and they were having lunch with Tom Ritchie on the table, and they're like freaking out. They're like, my
Yeah,
God, I can't believe it. This is so awesome.
Yeah.
sure.
And I want to keep that vibe. But yeah, I'm looking for vendors, exhibitors, or just come up and join us, or sponsors if you want to put your brand out there and support the event. I would really appreciate that. I'm trying to maybe build up something here. And actually, I saw now there's a similar festival like in Laguna Beach with a concours, and I think where was it again? They had a concours somewhere else just this weekend,
Hmm.
um, which I've never heard about anything like it before on the West Coast here, but I haven't lived here for a long time.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you guys know anything like it here. I think on the East Coast there's some. In Europe it's quite a thing.
Yeah,
But
I've never been aware of any Velo concourse. Have you, Chris?
Oh, no, no. Mm-mm.
Yeah. I know they just started running a BMX event up in Frogtown, and they had a concourse BMX thing, which that's the first time I'd ever heard of anything like that. I've seen BMX shows, like old school BMX shows before, but yeah, that was kind of cool to see. So that's how you know you're old when the stuff that you used to ride is now becoming like suitable for a museum. It's like, oh shit, what's happened? Yeah, you're not there yet, Laurent, but yeah, you'll at some point maybe you know.
yeah, well, I think it's also interesting to see, like the bikes and like, this whole history, especially when we talk about mountain biking. Um, like the racers, the bike builders, whatever, they were never really interested in it.
Yeah,
And now it starts to come around, because they are retiring. They're at the end of their career, whatever, and they have either the time or they reflect on their lives, and they are like, oh yeah, I had this bike. I wish I had it back. I mean, I had racers selling bikes, and then a couple of years later, they're like, oh, can you sell it back to me? And at the
right.
beginning, I was always like, if I have a racer so who wants his bike back, yeah, of course I'll sell it back to him for whatever I paid for it. Or now I'm at the point, I'm like, no, like my mission now, as I call it,
Mhm.
is to gather all these bikes in one place and to show them to the public, wherever that is, at first online, and eventually I'd like to travel to events like SEAT or World Cups and show them there. I think that would be huge.
Yeah,
Um, but just need a sponsor kind of to finance it,
right.
put
So
their name
expensive
on
to
it.
be at these events. I mean, like Sea Otter is
Yeah, but
very
those
expensive, you know.
those bikes, would get so much
Oh,
attention
they would. Yep.
depending on what you're trying to sell. Like if you're trying to sell a lubricant, how do you attract people to your booth? There's not many lubricant freaks out there.
Right.
So if you would have,
Well, there might be
Well,
one.
depends on what
uh,
industry we're talking about here.
yeah,
Sorry.
you know
Sorry, I
more
couldn't help
about that.
myself.
That was a softball right there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that would totally make sense, to have those old cool bikes there, and everyone would take photos of it with your logo in the back. And
For sure.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think, but it's the problem nowadays, even with the bike companies and stuff, where I'm trying to get a hold of people and be like, hey, I have like this and this bike. Are you interested in like showing it somewhere? And the problem is the brands, they belong to some investment group, and whoever is in charge might even not know much about bikes,
Yeah.
Right.
or especially not about the history, and they just don't really care enough about it. And I'm always giving like the example of, Coca-Cola, Apple, whatever huge successful companies, how they use their history to like prove that they are legit, to show to their customers, we have been around for a long time, we have been successful for a long time, especially to new customers. If you go out, you want to buy a new bike, what are you gonna buy? and if you can prove, hey, we have been doing this for 30 years and you have that whole history timeline,
Yeah.
I think that's a big plus. But nowadays, a lot of companies, they are just like deciding on, okay, this year we're gonna all invest into gravel, and that's it. All our budget goes to gravel, and we're
They're
gonna.
trying to ride that wave, I mean, it's the bike industry. It's just so niche driven, it's like, we did at one point, there's a whole idea of like one bike to slay them all, you know, but that's not the bike industry. The bike industry is like, oh, you want to ride it to work, and okay, well, I'm going to give you a specific bike just for that. And then, oh, you want to go bike packing? Okay, we're going to get a specific bike just for that. You want to ride your cross country mountain bike? Oh, specific bike. So yeah, I think the companies get caught up in they want to be on the leading edge of whatever the wave is, while still maintaining maybe some of these other categories. But yeah, the marketing investments tend to follow what's hot right at the moment. And yeah,
What
it's
what
challenging.
I found a bit sad about it is, with the gravel boom, not only did prices for events increase, but also it is taken away from like the cross country races,
Hmm.
which doesn't really make sense because you go to a gravel race and eventually they add a single trail to it, and everyone is like, wow, this was so much fun. Like, yes, it's mountain bike races.
Right.
And when you think about it, like I love the mountain bike marathon, which has never really landed here in the US, especially not in California. Here it's still like the classic cross country. It's like a whatever 40, 50 kilometer
Hmm.
big loop. Um, but if I do like a marathon, you have gravel in there. You have even pavement. You ride through the towns. It's so scenic. It's so adventurous.
Hmm.
But eventually, there's trails in there that are so gnarly that you have to walk them. There's bike parks in there. There's enduro trails in there. You ride everything.
Hmm.
And I mean, I have never walked at a downhill race, but I have walked at a marathon race. I've I've done some stage races over the Alps and stuff, and it has everything in it. And you can all do it on one bike, 100 to 120 millimeter. And those bikes nowadays, I think they call them like kind of down country,
Down country, yeah.
but they're so capable. I have done gravel races on them. I rode with my daughter on the shotgun seat in a bike park in Switzerland, going downhill on my 100 millimeter cross country bike,
Uh,
like demoralizing other people on big bikes.
sure, right.
And it's just like, why? Like, when does the industry jump back on that train and advertise that kind of bike? Because, I mean, I guess they don't want you to only own one bike.
That's right. I was gonna say that's not gonna happen. I hate to
Right,
break it
yeah.
to you.
They want a bunch of
Yeah,
bikes.
yeah.
But
You got to have a garage full of different tools for different rides.
I love my cross country bike. It's, nowadays 2.4 tires, and
Yeah,
it's just so great.
yeah, yeah. It is. It is. Certainly you could say that about a lot of different categories, though. There was a point where I was like, maybe I'll just have a gravel bike. I got injured and I sold off my road bike, and and once I got healthy again, I started riding the gravel bike. Just put road tires on it, so riding the gravel bike for road rides, and then I put some wider tires on it, ride single tracks, and I was just like, maybe I just do one bike, and then I got a road bike again, and I was like, what am I nuts? I mean, so nice having a road bike. And yeah, I think that if you love riding, I think you can make do on just about anything. That's
Yeah.
really true. You can have a good time no matter
Right.
what, but It is, obviously I'm a sales rep. I'm in the business of selling bicycles. I work for a company that makes all kinds of different bicycles, so I might not be the most objective person on this, but I do have a garage full of different style bikes, and I do appreciate each one of them uh, pretty equally, I would say. So, yeah.
So yeah, so do we.
Yeah, all right. So yeah, but your point is totally valid. Every time I ride, we have an XC bike called the Anthem. It's a little short travel. It's amazing. The bike can do just about anything. So yeah, the bikes are super versatile, and the tech just keeps getting better every year. And yeah, it's a lot of fun to be a part of. I always say to my friends that are outside the bike industry that working in the bike industry beats working because we're just playing with bikes and riding bikes and talking about bikes, and it's what most people do to recreate, and we get to do it every day for work. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah,
special.
Yeah,
yeah. All right.
that's what
Oh, great.
that's what I'm trying to achieve now, because I'm like so deep into mountain biking and into cycling in general. I love it so much. I'm like, like even working other things that are fun, it's like that motivation that I have towards cycling. I mean, I can't replicate that in some with some product that I don't really care about.
All right.
So I really like, to build something around that, and yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, it seems like you're well on your way.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I actually I do have to go to work. Darn it. We could talk bikes all day. But Lauren, it's been really a lot of fun getting to know you and learn about all the different things you got going on. And Velo Cosmos sounds like a great event. If you're in the Bay Area or even outside the Bay Area, you're listening to this podcast, you got an interesting bike, something unique. Maybe you come and show your bike and tell your story and network with other people that are really engaged in vintage bikes and whatnot. Sounds like a great event. I know the area for riding, it's fantastic trail riding. It's really becoming more of a destination for mountain biking. These in the last 5, 10 years. Yeah, so the trail networks are awesome. So yeah, check it out.
Yeah, no, it's very admirable what you've done, and thanks for your efforts in preserving that history of not only just the classic race bikes, but just all the bikes. And so it's really nice. And yeah, come on up, Nevada County, Grass Valley, Nevada City. There's a lot of history up here, everybody, and join us November 14th through the 17th at the
Yes.
Holbrook Hotel.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much, Lauren. Thanks all of you for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you, guys.
All
Yep.
right.